Now you'll notice that these two holding companies to which the money was given by the International Bankers Bank so that they could not be held responsible for what happened to the money that went out, the holding companies were holding nothing but liabilities of the loans made to the third world countries which they could not repay. Now it is designed, as he's going to show, that the third world countries default on their payment. By the way, did you hear something about that this past week? It was on the news. What countries said that they would not pay? Brazil, and what else? Argentina. Both of them said, we're not going to pay. They didn't tell you that agreements had been made with those countries to eventually forgive their loans, did they? If they would sign away perpetually the rights to the minerals of those countries. Watch out. You're going to see a rash of third world countries not paying their debts, and then here is what will happen on the heels of that. The bank holding companies are designed to go broke, and watch the events from that point on.
It then became clear, as a result of actually initially observation and subsequently ratification by information from within the Trilateral Commission, where we have our own people, that the forgiveness of the third world debts would quite obviously eliminate the assets which were being purchased by this second group of holding companies, leaving them only with the liabilities that were owed to the Middle Eastern nations.
So the group of holding companies, or the bank holding companies, are designed to collapse. When the third world countries say we cannot pay, the bank holding companies say we are bankrupt. At that point, the international bankers say to the Arabs, all right, boys, sorry, but the bank holding companies that we gave your money to under those 30-year time deposits of all these billions you've put into our banks over these years, those bank holding companies just went broke. So sorry, Arabs, but as of today, you are bankrupt. Possible for the Arab world to go bankrupt? Really? The richest people in the world? Now you'll understand why.
Being serviced by the prime banks. Hence, the Arab nations had no idea that these liabilities were now owned by the holding companies, any more than the debtor nations had stopped paying the prime banks.
Now he says that these Arabs, who were nothing but nomads roaming the deserts a few years ago, did not understand any of the inner manipulations of bank financing and world bankers. Therefore, they have fallen for this line all of these years. But now, within the past 6 to 9 months, the international bankers, or I should say the Arabs, have become aware of what the international bankers have done to them. A few months ago, I was in Northern California. An individual in the audience after the meeting said, Pastor Williams, would you have a bite to eat with us after the meeting? I'd like to tell you something. When we sat at the restaurant, she said, my company that I work for handles the transfer of money from Arab countries to America. She said, we have been told that by May 1st, 1987, we must transfer so many millions of dollars out of the Arab countries into America in any kind of securities that are halfway decent to buy. She said, do you know why? I said, yes, because the Arab sheikhs and sheiks realize that whenever they are declared bankrupt, that the people under them, the millions of people in the Arab countries who have been kept by giveaway programs of housing, food, schooling, medical care, everything, you have never seen such an uprising and turmoil and literal massacres as will happen in the Arab countries when they're declared bankrupt and the people can no longer be given all of these amenities. At that point, the sheikhs and sheiks know they'll have to run. Where are they going to run? They'll run to America, where they have already transferred their assets, and the date was given to me by this individual in Northern California that said, by May 1, we have been told we must transfer X number of millions of dollars out of the Arab world into the United States of America.
The prime banks and the holding companies arrangement was merely that the prime banks were going to act as servicing agents for the holding companies, again, so that the third world nations didn't know that the holding companies actually were owed the money, because it was filtering through the prime banks and still is. The effect of the elimination of the assets of the second group of holding companies is actually threefold.
Now, he says that the effect of this, when they announce to the Arabs that the holding companies are broke and that you are, as of today, bankrupt, what are the Arabs going to do in order to attempt to maintain some semblance of order back in their countries? He says the effect of that is threefold, and here are the three things that it will cause.
They would be insolvent and would be legally able to declare themselves insolvent.
First of all, the bank holding companies will be legally broke and can declare themselves insolvent, can say to the international bankers, we've just lost this money. The international bankers aren't responsible because they had only given the money to the bank holding companies, and the international bankers will say to the Arabs, boys, you're broke as of today. Now, the second effect.
Go into chapter 7 or 13, I forget, but one or the other. Declare themselves bankrupt, declare themselves insolvent, and legally and legitimately avoid payment to the Middle Eastern nations.
And legally and legitimately avoid payment to the Arab nations because the bankers had put it into bank holding companies which they could not be held responsible for. Are you beginning to see the utter degradation, the depth of low-down scoundrelism that's being done by the power controllers of the world to intentionally bring about a bankruptcy of people that they made some years ago? They made them, and now they're breaking them by a design plan, the same thing they're doing to the American public. Now let's go to the second point.
The precipitous effect of that, in view of the westernization of the third world nations, is obvious. They would have to and will have to liquidate all the other assets they have, at least a colossal volume of the other assets that they have.
Whenever the Arabs find out they're broke, they have but one choice: liquidate. What do they liquidate? Remember that now they have bought farmland all over America. They likewise have bought stocks and bonds. They control much of the New York Stock Exchange. And automatically, the next morning, after being declared bankrupt, they will dump their stocks onto the New York Stock Exchange. What will happen when the Arabs dump billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of stock that they've bought on the New York Stock Exchange one Monday morning? What will happen to the stock exchange? What happens to farmland that is already depressed? Remember a few years ago that farmers' land was worth $3,000 an acre? Today that identical same farmland is worth $700 an acre because of deflation that is brought about by the Federal Reserve. Now the Arabs dump all that farmland for sale overnight. What will happen to the price of farmland? It'll be forced down even further, maybe $300 an acre. And when that happens, what happens to the farmer? He has no collateral to borrow money next year from the bank in order to plant his crop. What happens to the crops of America and the grocery store shelves and hunger in the cities? Are you beginning to see the scenario for control of a nation? Here is point number 3.
A colossal volume of the other assets that they have, which frankly are primarily represented by U.S. corporate ownership by them and U.S. corporate ownership of many, many billions of dollars worth of U.S. stock. The effect of the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the Middle Eastern people's sale of even 25% of their total holdings on the U.S. market and the other markets but U.S. dollar denominated will be absolutely chaotic in terms of the stock market.
He says that when these stocks are dumped on the stock market overnight, the corporate ownerships are up for sale, and the farmland they've bought is now all up for sale. He says the effect on this to the American economy will be absolutely chaotic. Then what will they do?
Real estate and everything else, the catastrophic effect of that has been designed to throw the American stock market, American private corporations, American real estate, and people in general into a state of confusion. The plan is that at that time, the state of confusion will be greeted with the salvation of the benevolent bankers on two fronts. Firstly, they propose to eliminate cash because of the collapse, and also, secondarily, to stop drug trafficking, thirdly, to stop tax cheating. And nobody can argue with any of those reasons.
Now, he says when this happens, and the American people don't know what's going on, and suppose tomorrow morning the stock market should crash, farmland goes to the very bottom, food starts to get scarce in the grocery store shelves, the bankers come along and say, look what these dirty Arabs have done to you. What would you do? What would the average American do? You'd fall for their line, wouldn't you? You'd say, sure they did. Those dirty Arabs that want to control the whole world, that have bought up so much of America with the money that we gave them through oil prices, and here they have collapsed the American stock market. So the benevolent bankers, that he says with a smirk in his voice, he says the benevolent bankers will step up and say, look what they've done to you. Now, what are we going to do about this? First of all, he says, we've got to have a new currency. Isn't that great? And the next thing we'll have to do is use that new currency to stop the dope traffic in the condition in America. And he said we'll also have to have a debit card for the purpose of stopping people from tax cheating anymore. Because if we don't, we'll never get ourselves back on our feet again. And if you'll just turn everything over to us benevolent bankers, the Arabs now have broken you, we'll be glad to bring you out of this chaotic condition that we have if you'll just take our debit card and our number. Will the American public fall for it? Lock, stock, and barrel, as the old Georgia farmer would say. Why? Because we've never been told the truth. Now, we continue.